July is almost over. Let's do a book wrap up. Hi everyone, I'm Tabitha, and this is going to be the monthly book wrap up. Now, thanks in part to the Reading Rush 2019, this has been a huge month for my reading, and I finished 17 books. That pace keeps up for the rest of the months. I might have to start posting more than one of these a month, but in the meantime, remember that in the description, I've put the titles of the books that I'm going to be reviewing as well as timestamps that would allow you to jump to that part if you're interested in a particular book, or if you've already watched this all the way through and you're trying to remind yourself what one book was rated. A few disclaimers as always before we start. Firstly, please remember these reviews are my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, and you're certainly entitled to your own opinion. In fact, if you've read one of the books that I'm reviewing today, I'd love for you to drop your opinion down in the comments so I can hear what you thought. Please just remember to be respectful of my opinion and of the author who put in the time. Secondly, I read everything. Please don't expect to see a single genre or age category or even release year. If you are a more particular reader, or if you just happen to know exactly what you like, which is awesome, pay attention to the Who I Recommend This For section, or Who Should Read This section, where I'll break down exactly what type of reader might enjoy a particular book. Lastly, if there's something you think I would enjoy based on something you see in this video, drop the name of the book and the author in the comments below, and I will add it to my TBR. Of course, my TBR at the time of filming this is about 450 books, so I don't know when I'll get to it. If you are a publisher or an author who would like me to read a book and review a book that you had a part in bringing to life, in the description of this video, you'll notice that I have a link to either my website or to a review document where you can fill it out to submit your book and possibly even jump up higher in the TBR. Okay, this is going to be long enough without me rambling on, so let's get to the books. This could be a lot. So the first one that I read for the month of July was this one. This is The Raven's Tale by Kat Winters. Gorgeous, gorgeous cover. This was published in 2019 by Amulet Books. It is 361 pages, and that includes some extras. This book is a young adult historical fiction book, but it does have fantasy elements to it. So maybe historical fantasy might be a better genre for it if we're being specific. Here's your synopsis. Young Edgar Poe is on the brink of escaping his foster family forever when a macabre muse shows up, threatening everything. So what didn't I like? Honestly, this book is a bit slow in the middle, but I know that that was intentional. They're going through a period where the muse and Edgar himself are both bordering on depressed. So although it was slow, I can forgive it because I felt like it was really important. What did I like? I love Edgar Allan Poe. I love him. So the nods to his poems, the accuracy of his lifestyle, the research, the history, everything that went into this is for sure 10 out of 10. I also thought the poems that were done in Poe style that weren't actually Poe's were very well done. The concept of a real flesh and blood muse is cool. So who should read this one? If you are an Edgar Allan Poe fan, I'm going to recommend this one highly. If you like dark, sad, macabre stories, I'm going to recommend this one highly. If you're a poetry fan, or if you like stories about muses, again, I'm going to highly recommend this one. I went 4 stars on this. It did get knocked off of 5 just for that slight slow middle, for that you felt like you were wallowing in their depression with them. That can be real hard to get through. Please don't quit the book when it slows. If you're in it for the love of Poe, stick with it until the end and you will get exactly what you're looking for. Okay, book 2 for the month of July is The Green Mile by Stephen King. This book was originally published in March of 1996. The audiobook version was originally published in 1999 by Simon & Schuster. I don't know what you know about The Green Mile, but it was originally published in 6 shorter novels, 592 pages if you put all 6 together, which this was all 6 together. The other thing I should tell you is that I actually read this in high school, which I thought was after it had been out for a little while, but looking at this, that would have made it a pretty new release at the time. And I remember thinking that some of this was over my head, that I would enjoy it more as an adult. So I'm really glad that I reread it. This is an adult novel. It is classified as a horror or a thriller book. Your synopsis. Welcome to E-Block, where convicted killers await their turn walking the Green Mile. Prison guard Paul Edgecombe has seen his share of oddities, but John Coffey is about to challenge everything Paul believes. What didn't I like about this one? The language is a little crass in some parts, and it doesn't always seem to serve a point. It makes you kind of wonder why it was there. You don't fully understand it. There are some repetitive parts. That's because this was serialized. When I read it the first time, I actually read the 6 separate small ones. So I'm sure at the time I would have appreciated the repetition, reminding you what happened in the previous ones. But in this one, listening to it all at once, it did seem a little repetitive. Also, I didn't feel like we needed the Percy-Brad comparison. I think it was a tool used as a way to make Brad someone we didn't like by relating him to Percy, but I don't know that it really helped the plot or was necessary. Okay, so what did I like? This book had very well-written characters, which is one of the things I loved. John Coffey, Mr. Jingles. I even liked Paul Edgecombe. So these characters are characters you can connect with and that you like. They drive the plot, they're important, but you like them. I also loved the ending to this story. You see a little bit of it coming, and for me this was a reread, but still I was a little surprised, and there were details and things that I forgot that I really thoroughly enjoyed. As a side note, by the way, I have not seen the movie, which I'm sure could change things if I had. Supernatural element. Stephen King gets me every time when he throws in the supernatural element, and this book delivers that in a big and pleasing way. Who should read this? If you haven't already, and you are someone who likes thrillers that toe that line between thriller and horror, this is a good one. If you were to say that true horror is what other people do to each other, what people do to each other, you're going to like where this book goes and what this book is about. For me, this was 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would read it again for a 3rd time. Book number 3 for July is this one, Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. It is a 2016 release, although 2017 for this paperback that I have here. It's published by Jimmy Books, which of course is Little Brown and Company or Hatchet Book Group. It is 325 pages, including historical notes from the author and an author's note. It is young adult and it is a historical fiction. Here's your synopsis. Audrey is shunning society's expectations by following her passion, which just could get her killed as she attempts to find Jack the Ripper. What didn't I like? Normally I like side romance in my young adult, but in this one the chemistry with Thomas felt forced. That's really problematic for young adult. Most of the times when we read a good young adult story, we want good plot, we want good characters, but we also want our side romance to feel real and relatable. This felt forced. Because of that, I think I wanted more crime scenes and more autopsies and less of the romance. And because of that, the middle dragged. The middle, where we should have really enjoyed it, dragged quite a bit, probably all because of that romance. So what did I like? Readers are seriously going to love Audrey's attitude towards women's rights. She's way ahead of her time on this one. She is working a job she shouldn't have been allowed to work back then, and it made for some great conversations between her and some other characters. Of course, I love the mystery. I love a good mystery. I love a good thriller. This delivered on that. I don't know a lot about the history behind Jack the Ripper. I haven't done the research myself, so I found all that fascinating, but could not necessarily tell you if it was accurate. So, who should read this one? If you are someone who does study Jack the Ripper, I would highly suggest you read this. However, you may want to actually start with the note in the back about the historical and creative liberties she took. It will tell you ahead of time where she took liberties so that you keep yourself from getting angry when they pop up and you're like, that's not how it happened. This would be more for people trying crime or thriller for the first time who just happen to be young adult fans. I gave this one 3 stars overall. I do not think everyone will love this debut. However, there is a second one. The second one is called Hunting Prince Dracula. I have hopes that Kerri Maniscalco will fall into her groove now that her character's already been developed and actually lead to a second book that's better than the first. So I'm going to be checking out that second one, and as soon as I read it, I'll make sure I let you guys know. But for Stalking Jack the Ripper, I did go 3 stars. All right, book number 4 for July is Someday by David Levithan. Someday is the sequel to the book Every Day, also by David Levithan. This was a 2018 publication by Alfred Knopf for Random House. It is 394 pages, and I would classify it as young adult contemporary fantasy. Can I say that? Contemporary, yes, but still has that fantasy element. A is in a new body every day. Every day, A has a new life, but every day in love with the same girl. What didn't I like about this sequel? There are a lot of viewpoints in this one that pop up. If I really dig into this, there were quite a few viewpoints that I questioned what they did for the plot and what they were doing there. This time around, The romance seemed to get in the way of the story. In this book, we've already established that, we already understood it, and now it's getting in the way of what seemed like it was supposed to be a bigger story about whether or not there are other people like A, that kind of thing being explored. So what did I like? This story that David Levithan is telling is probably the best lens to look at diversity that I've ever seen. Because A is waking up in a different body every day. A has a great chance to see how people with different disabilities or whatever are really living. That, for me, was really nailed here on day 6,100. I loved the way it was portrayed. I connected with it. I adored it. And it just reminded me again why I really, really loved Every Day the first time around. But the plot that isn't about romance does really move, and it does have some big points to connect with and some big things to make you think. In fact, my third point of things that I loved is the analysis in this one of right and wrong, of morality in general, is amazing. That delivered in a big way and made this one rank higher for me than it would have if that hadn't been there. So who should read this one? If you are still intrigued by the concept, start with book 1. But if you're intrigued by the concept of someone who wakes up in a different body every day, you should give this one a go. If you loved book 1, you cannot go wrong with the continuation of the story. If you're someone who enjoys morality questions in a book, I'm going to suggest this one as well. For me, this was 4.5 stars. Every Day, the first book, was a solid 5-star for me. This one was about 4.5 stars, but I rounded up to 5 for Goodreads. The themes here are solid, and it is worth a read. Okay. Book number 5 for July is the book If I Stay by Gayle Forman. This is a 2019 publication from Dutton Books, 201 pages. I would have classified it as YA paranormal, but a lot of readers on Goodreads are calling it YA contemporary. So your synopsis. After an accident, Maya is faced with the most important choice of her life. What didn't I like? This book has a very scattered timeline. You almost have one basic main timeline, main story that's going start to finish. But in between that, we're shooting off and getting memories that can come from any age, any time, anything. They don't necessarily have to go in order. So it can be a little hard to piece together. Music, movie, and TV show references felt more appropriate for my generation than Maya's. And I don't normally notice things like this, so it was interesting that I noticed it. Maya and her friends keep relating to movies, music, and TV shows that my generation, people who are in their 30s, can we just say that? In their 30s, would relate to. Like Maya's parents would have made those references, but Maya herself, it seemed a little inconsistent. I expected 1 or 2 younger ones to be thrown in, maybe be a quirk about her character, that she also knew some older movies and music, but it seemed consistently and always to be my generation. And for me, that felt strange. And like I said, I don't normally notice that. The thing that bothered me the most was there were minor inconsistencies in some of the things characters did or said that really got under my skin. The biggest one I can think of is that Maya says something like, I lied to him for the first time, and then proceeds to tell you 3 to 5 times she lied to him previously. So the inconsistencies bugged me a bit. So what did I like? Because there were things about this one that I liked. The tragic start is going to grab your attention right away. So really that's that main storyline running through the whole book from start to finish. I also liked Maya's choices. I don't want to ruin what her big choice has to be, but it's relatable and it's realistic for a young adult. So the last thing that I liked or loved, for this one I loved this. So as much as I think this missed connecting with actual young adults, people my age might connect a lot with the dad character by accident, even though he's not the main character. The choices and the decisions that he has to make and the things that he does in his life, told through those memories and the backgrounds and everything, just highly relatable and absolutely wonderful, and I really, really liked him. I would read this book again expressly for him. So, who should give this one a shot? If you like emotional books and you're looking for a quick read, this one clocks in at 200 pages. You can't go wrong. And it was emotional, I'll give you that. It tugged at your heartstrings and it was emotional. If you like stories about the meaning of life or what makes life worth living, you can't go wrong with this nice, quick, and short one. If you like musicians overall and you like reading stories about musicians, maybe give this one a try too. For me, this was 3-star. I don't think everyone was going to love it. It did have some slow parts, and it could have been a better story for If I Stay, Gayle Forman. Whew, okay. My 6th book for July was this one, City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. which, of course, if you're familiar with the series, is the 4th book in the Mortal Instruments series. It was published in 2011 by Simon & Schuster. It is a young adult fantasy story. And it clocks in at, I do believe, 424 pages. I'm not going to give you a synopsis because it's the 4th book in the Mortal Instruments series. So, Mortal Instruments series follows shadow hunters as they tackle demons, and there's vampires, and you've got all of your fantasy creatures into one world. And I would spoil all of books 1, 2, and 3 if I tried to give you a synopsis. What didn't I like? The biggest thing that I didn't like was the redundancy to this entire story. So this entire story recycles an awful lot of the same discussions and conversations with the same characters in the same way that I felt like we already dealt with in books 1, 2, and 3. So there's only so many times you can take Brooding Jace, for example, and make him question his entire past in a storyline. And I don't fully understand what this book added to the series. Something else I didn't like. Okay, this one, I actually laughed out loud at a part where you probably shouldn't have been because it wasn't meant to be funny. The convenient twists to the story felt strange and reaching and were definitely not something done in books 1, 2, and 3. So there were things that happened in the book where character A needs something desperately. Character B is nowhere near the situation, shouldn't know anything about it, and yet finds this tiny clue, manages to interpret it absolutely perfectly, and comes to the rescue of character A. It's a little far-fetched, and I don't remember it ever happening in the first 3 books. So what did I like? Because there were things I liked. I actually liked our villain in this one. I felt like Lilith had potential to be a very amazing, well-written, scary villain. Liked Lilith better than Valentine, actually. I just felt like she was unpredictable and cruel, and those are honestly the best things in a villain, especially a fantasy villain. The other thing I liked is going to be an unpopular opinion. Alec and Magnus are a source of contention, right, for Mortal Instrument fans, because some people absolutely love Alec and Magnus, and I just don't. I never really got into that. And I think the reason I didn't like them is because Magnus, spoiler alert if you haven't read it, Magnus is immortal, and so he's ageless, right? He's lived hundreds and hundreds of years, and Alec is not. And so it always kind of creeped me out a little. Here we have a teenager with somebody who with unimaginable amounts of life experience, and I just felt like that was a little creepy and weird. And I think I always, in order to like them even a little, I always had to assume that Alec kind of had blinders on and forgot that Magnus was immortal and just treated Magnus as the age he appeared to be. So the fact that in this book, Alec is finally forced to confront the fact that Magnus is immortal, and he's forced to confront Magnus's true age, actually made me jump on team Alec and Magnus more. So I guess I'm getting closer to how much some of the rest of you love them. They are adorable. The age thing's just weird. Who would like this? Okay, if you are a fantasy fan, if the idea of vampires and shadow hunters and werewolves appeals to you, I'm going to suggest you read the Mortal Instruments series. But if you finished City of Glass and you loved it, and you loved the ending, and you feel satisfied, and you feel a sense of solved, which is how I felt at the end of City of Glass, maybe stop. Maybe don't read City of Fallen Angels. However, if you just love those characters so much that you can't help it and you must keep going, this is going to give you more Jace, more Simon, more Clary. So feel free to dive right in and fall in love with those characters if the reason you read it was for the characters. That's what I'm going to say. For me, this was a 2-star. I wish the series had ended with City of Glass. So unless you guys drop comments and tell me book 5 is completely worth my time, I will probably stop at that one. So that's my review for City of Fallen Angels. Okay, book 7 for July is this one. Long Grows the Dark by Catherine Labadie. I might be saying that wrong. Catherine Labadie. Right. I fell right in love with that cover right away. This is a 2018 publication. She's an indie author, so this is published under her title, Labadie Press. It is a new adult, and it is a fantasy story. Your synopsis. Gwendolyn has a past life, and it is about to collide with her life at Starford University. What didn't I like? So there's a few minor slow spots, kind of in the middle-ish, that felt a little slow, a little drag-ish, but they're very short, and they go away fast, and it's temporary. So it's what I didn't like, but at the same time, it's real small. What else didn't I like? I usually love love triangles. I'm one of those people. But this one wasn't my favorite. And I think that's because, to me, there was one obvious choice and one terrible, awful, wrong. Okay, you know what this reminds me of? The love triangle, the first time I read Hunger Games, felt like this to me because I was Team Peeta right from the beginning, right? And I was like, I don't understand why we're still talking about Gayle. I felt the same way about this one. I'm Team Niles right from the beginning. Made this love triangle feel weird to me. But honestly, as I'm saying it, I'm realizing that probably means it was incredibly well written because I fell in love with his characters. The split storyline. So this is told between two storylines. It's told between now, Gwendolyn, and before, her past life. And the split storyline thing, at first, in the very beginning, first couple times it happens, is a little off-putting, but that goes away very fast. So what did I love? Magic. Hello. I love magic in a book. I really do. This one I loved even more. The reason why I say that is because this was magic used in a way that today's young adult or new adult would actually use magic. And I loved that. I loved every minute of that. So, Catherine, well done on bringing that magic into the modern age and using it right. The other thing I liked, remember I said in the beginning the split storyline was a little off-putting. The split storyline comes together fast, very fast. I would say not even 25% of the way to the book. You're finally understanding the split storyline and you're comfortable with it, and then it works. It makes the rest of the story flow. It connects the rest of the story. She just nailed that split storyline thing. The other thing I like a good villain. You know that. This villain is well written. The villain is scary. And so in my opinion, that makes the villain awesome. Who do I recommend this one for? If you are a fantasy fan, boom. Specifically if you're young adult or new adult fantasy fans, I would say go for it. If you like side romance plots in your epic adventure, fantasy adventure stories, I'm going to suggest this one. If you're a love triangle fan, give it a shout. Let me know. I would be interested to hear if anybody's not Team Niles because, like I said, I was Team Niles from the beginning. Other thing, if you like the idea of a dual storyline, if the dual storyline appeals to you at all, I'm going to suggest this one because it was well done. Overall, I went 4 stars on this book. I recommend this one, you guys. Go find this one. Pick this one up. This was good. Well done. 4 stars for Long Grows the Dark. All right. Book number 8 for July is this one, Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. It is a 2017 release from Dutton Books for young readers. The paperback version or hardcover version, they're 288 pages. It is young adult contemporary. But the synopsis is, it all begins with a fugitive billionaire and the promise of a cash reward. So what didn't I like? It sounds like when you read that blurb, that synopsis, that this is going to be a mystery story, right? Fugitive billionaire and a cash reward sounds like a mystery story. But to be honest, I wanted more mystery and more puzzle solving. I wanted that. That's what I came to the book looking for. So one of the things I didn't like was that you didn't get enough of that. The other thing I didn't like is Daisy is sold as being a good friend, and that kind of bothered me. At best, she's tolerable, but just not a good friendship. At worst, she would be like toxic to this person, to Aza, our main character. And then the only other thing I didn't like is that the title doesn't really click for me. And you see this a lot with people joking around about it, like what do turtles have to do with this? It is explained and it does come in to the explanation where the turtles come from, but it wouldn't have been my first choice of title. So what did I like? And there were a lot of things that I loved or liked about this one. First of all, our narrator Aza has anxiety, OCD, and the truth behind this made the read amazing. On the one hand, it's not a story about a missing millionaire and a reward money. But on the other hand, it's a great story about a girl with OCD and anxiety and learning how to live with that mental illness and accept that her mental health is different than other people's. And so if you take it as a story about OCD or anxiety, it's a fantastic story. So that leads me right into who should read this. If you live with someone or want to understand someone who has OCD or anxiety to crippling levels, I would say this book is a must-read for you because it puts you in their head in a way that you maybe have never been before. I mean, of course, if you are someone who has severe anxiety or maybe even OCD and you want to relate to a character, this is a good read for you. But even more important, it's for the people who maybe don't, who want to understand what it's like. Those are the people I'm going to recommend this for. This book for me was 4 stars. If you go into it knowing that it's not going to be that mystery puzzle solving book you necessarily were looking for, but if you come into it knowing that it's going to be a great book to relate to anxiety and OCD and you want to understand this character, I don't know that I've ever read a better book for that. So 4 stars for John Green's Turtles All the Way Down. Book number 9 for the month of July is The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I'm probably one of the only people who haven't read this book yet, so this was like a big deal. This book was published in 2015 by Henry Holt & Company. It clocks in at 465 pages, including acknowledgments at the end. It's a young adult fantasy book, the first in a series. Your synopsis: 6 dangerous outcasts, 1 impossible heist. Kaz's crew is the only thing that might stand between the world and destruction if they don't kill each other first. So let's start with what I didn't like. Did notice that the language of the fantasy world can take a little bit of getting used to. The other thing that I didn't like is the ending to this one wasn't exactly my favorite. But I'm aware of the fact that that's probably because there is a second one. So chances are I didn't particularly like this ending, but it's setting up for the next one. So what did I like? The morality question is really highlighted here. Are you a bad person because you've done bad things? Another thing I liked is I'm a big fan of found family type situations where a group of kids or a group of people will come together and just make like an instant family connection almost and be able to work together like they've known each other their entire lives. And Kaz's crew is big time on the found family angle, and I really liked that. Third thing I like for this one is it is filled with strong kids. I like the idea of taking kids who maybe have crappy backstories or don't have the best situations and sticking them out on their own and just watching them be amazing. So yes, they seem older than they are, but I think that's because of what they've been through. And that just made me love them. And then the last thing I loved about this book is that there's a lot of witty banter, and there were times when I actually laughed out loud when it wasn't necessarily appropriate to the story. So you might have an assassination attempt or people dying, and I'm laughing because their witty banter is great. So it was good comic relief and good in the moment, and I liked that. So who should read Six of Crows if they haven't already? If you like morally questionable characters, I'm going to suggest Six of Crows. Kaz Brecker and his crew are morally questionable, and that's what makes them wonderful. And if you like heist-type books, so I've recommended other books like this, like The Deceivers. Of course, if you like Ocean's 11 movies, pretty much if you like heist-type books, Six of Crows is a great way to go. And you all probably knew that, which is why you kept recommending I read it. Overall, I ended up 4 stars on Six of Crows. Recommended if you're one of the people I mentioned, morally questionable characters who happen to like heist-type books, and I will be looking for the second one. Book 10 for the month of July is Beauty and the Beast Lost in a Book by Jennifer Donnelly. It is a 2017 publication from Disney Press, and I would call it middle grade fantasy. Basically, your synopsis here is Belle, from Beauty and the Beast fame, befriends an enchanted book in the castle library. What didn't I like about this book? Okay, first of all, the characters here felt very different to me than the Disney original movie. So it's supposed to be Belle, Cogsworth, Lumiere, the Beast, Mrs. Potts, Chip, the same characters that you're used to from Disney, but to me they felt different, specifically Belle. If Belle's going to be different and a little more selfish, I want a reason. I want to know what secret are you hiding that the Disney movie didn't reveal that actually made her be selfish. And I didn't feel like I got that. So that was kind of frustrating. The second thing I didn't particularly like is I wanted more Beast. He's an incredibly important character, not only in this version of the story, but of course in the story. Beast is one of my favorite. I feel like he has a great opportunity to highlight a complex character and give us differences in the situation, and that wasn't played with enough. He doesn't feature enough in this book. The third and last thing I didn't like about this is, I don't know how to explain it, but the storyline just fell kind of flat for me. Like, all the way, it wasn't bad, but all the way across the book, I kept thinking, I want more, I want more, I want more. And situations or things would come up, and I'd think, oh, can we play with that more? Let's play with that more. So it just felt a little flat to me. So what did I like? Because there were things about this retelling, this story, that I did appreciate. First of all, the concept of death and love as actual characters, that's great. If I get nitpicky about it, I'd say that the character of Death specifically, I just loved her. I loved how she was explained. I loved how she was portrayed, but I wanted more of love. The other thing I like is, of course, this is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast. So anytime, which was a lot of the book, that I felt connected to those characters or that story, I just loved it. And it's for sure one reason why the book got the rating that it did instead of anything lower, is because it just gave me huge nostalgia points. So who do I think should read this one? Well, if you're a fan of Beauty and the Beast, this came out in 2017, so you probably already have. But if you're a fan of Beauty and the Beast who's been avoiding it, I would say give it a shot, because it gives you more of some of those characters you love. in a new and interesting way. And the last thing I would say is if you are a person who is interested in that different side of Belle, I would say give this one a shot. Overall, I went 3 stars for this one. It had some mild problems that are going to make it appeal more to a niche audience than others, but still a fun read and a good book, especially if you're a fairy tale or a Beauty and the Beast fan. And book number 11 for the month of July is this book, The Revenant, a novel of revenge by Michael Punke. So it's a 2012, originally published in 2012 by Picador, 272 pages. And if you don't already know about The Revenant, it is an adult age category historical fiction story. If you did not already know, The Revenant was made into a movie in 2015 starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and it is the movie he won an Oscar for. So I happen to own that movie on Blu-ray. I'm a huge Leonardo DiCaprio fan. I'm finally getting around to reading the book all these years after seeing and loving the movie. Keep that in mind. It may have some influence on my reading. The Revenant is based on a true story of a fur trader who's left for dead in 1823, and he goes to remarkable lengths to survive, according to the title, for revenge. So what didn't I like about this one? Like I said, I saw the movie first. There are some major, like story-altering differences between the motivation and the resolution to the story between the movie and the book. Probably because of the fact that I saw the movie first, I preferred this. That's probably the first time in my life I have ever confidently said that. So I'm going to say it again because this is huge for a book lover. The movie was better. Maybe because I saw it first. Maybe because it's Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know. It was slow more than it needed to be. In a survival story, it's supposed to be a little slow in the survival points. We're supposed to understand that survival was not easy. It didn't happen fast. He had to survive like this for a long time. But it was slow on parts of the story where it didn't need to be. Some characters served no purpose and were really annoying. At first I thought, okay, I can forgive this. This is based on a true story. These people really existed. Maybe I just don't understand their purpose. Then I listened to the historical notes at the end of the audiobook, and most of those characters I had thought were annoying and served no purpose were mentioned as being completely fictional. So in other words, I didn't think they served a purpose. I wondered why they were in the story, and it turns out you added them to the story for no reason. So if we didn't need them and they didn't belong there, I really struggled to understand why they were included. So there's a few spots in the audiobook where the narrator read things in a very dramatic, phonetical voice, and it annoyed me. So out of pure curiosity, I turned to the ebook and read through those same sections, and it turns out they were phonetically spelled in that way. In fact, in the print version, it's incredibly unnecessary, annoying, and hard to read. So I can't really knock the audiobook narrator for reading them that way. That's how they were written. But I don't understand why, and it really bothered me. So what did I like? Because there were things in the book version that I actually enjoyed. The first one of those is that the survival stuff, which if you break down the book is about the middle, I would say probably third. It has a very violent beginning, so just be ready for that. And the ending is very different. But that middle, probably third, is all survival stuff. That stuff was great. That stuff was the meat of the book. And in fact, if you decide that that's what you like, you would love that middle third. The other thing I like, there's a few spots, and this is a controversial opinion, by the way, there's a few spots in the book where you jump characters. So maybe your narrator's following Hugh Glass, your main character, and then maybe your narrator is following the captain of the fur traders whose name I just blanked on. Or maybe you're following Fitzgerald or whatever. I, as an unpopular opinion, actually liked those parts where we went back and forth to other characters rapidly and very fast. I think it's because those parts tended to come during the parts I felt were feeling slow. We started popping characters fast and it sped it up. Who do I think should read this? I just feel like this has a really, really niche audience. If you happen to be someone who's really, really into history, like 1823's fur trading, I just caught your interest, that you're really into history, and you're really into survival stories. And I don't mean one or the other. Like in this Venn diagram of people who are into 1823's history, people who are into survival stories, you have to be in that niche part of the Venn diagram where those two overlap, and then you would love this book. So if that happens to be you, go for it. As a side note, by the way, I do not think that about the movie. The movie had a very different ending, a very different motivation for the main character. If you happen to be into stories about revenge, I would lead you towards this. They made one of his motivations revenge. where that didn't come through as much for me in the book because of the changes they made. Then again, the book was done first, and again, I think maybe I preferred this because I saw it first. Anyway, that's my rating for The Revenant, 2 stars, and it would be my 11th book for July. The 12th book for the month of July is A Soul Reclaimed by Shayna Grissom. It is a YA fantasy published in 2019 by Sands Press, which is an indie publishing. It is 192 pages. Our synopsis: Nora, the stepdaughter of the steward of hell, has been cast out of her home. Now, with the help of a giant hunter, she will travel the 7 layers of hell to find out why her stepfather is so afraid of her. So, the things I didn't like about this book. First of all, sometimes there are dream sequences, and the dream sequences almost blend in too well with the scenes, leading to a little bit of confusion. There are a few, I don't really want to call them typos, more spacing issues with paragraphs starting in the wrong spot or starting in different places. But again, I was working off of an ebook for this one, so that could be very different for a print version. I'm not sure. Let's get to what I did like, because there was a lot of great stuff to love about this particular book. First of all, this entire book takes place in hell, in the 7 layers of hell, and that was done really, really well. They are almost presented as if they should be normal, which was wonderful. I absolutely loved everything about the setting of this one, and I'm hoping that Shayna puts out another book, maybe in this series, taking place in the same location. That would be wonderful. Second thing I liked, we have a character named Aegis. Aegis is a wonderful hunter, and he's a great character. He didn't seem to fit into the cliche of what I thought he was going to be when he was first introduced. He seemed to break that stereotype or mold, and I love when a character does that. I don't want to spoil anything, but the next thing I liked is that the ending to this one was very, very well done. I was happy and satisfied with how the ending tied up things in the book, and just in general, the way that the ending broke out. I thought that was wonderful, well done. Last thing is, although it might be hard to tell on this because I do have an ebook version and it unfortunately is black and white, this cover is gorgeous. Take a look at it. You can even go to Goodreads to see the full cover version. Wonderful, wonderful cover. Absolutely gorgeous image on there. If you're judging books by covers, go for this one. So who should read this book? In general, if you are YA fantasy fans, I'm going to say go ahead and add this one to your list because this is a very well done young adult fantasy that's different than some of the other stuff you might have read before, and we're always looking for different. If you specifically like that chosen one trope, you're going to like this one. It's not done in the same way that it's always been done before, so there are differences and variants to that, but it's still there and well done. Lastly, if you are a fan of books where the main character is going to come into themselves, learn who they are, and really figure out how they work best and what their strengths are as a person, I'm going to suggest you check out this one. I gave 4 stars to A Soul Reclaimed by Shayna Grissom. My 13th book for the month of July is going to have to break out of the format that I normally use. So I try to stick to that format pretty strongly, and so I'm going to keep this review real short. This book is called Driven by Desire by Luann McLane, and I'm not going to say much about this other than to say it was incredibly problematic for me, and I honestly cannot recommend this one. Some of you saw my blog post about my problems with romance books, and there was even a few people who commented on social media to ask, what in the world book are you reading? It sounded absolutely terrible. So I honestly cannot recommend this book, but this was the 13th book, and I did finish it, I promise. Okay, 14th book for the month of July is this one, 2 Days Gone by Randall Silvis. This is an adult genre mystery thriller. It's a 2017 release from Source Books. Basically, your synopsis here, Tom Huston's family was stabbed to death and he is on the run. So let's talk about what I didn't like because I like to end on a positive note. DeMarco is a little bit of a cliche detective, but if you are looking for something where the detective breaks out of that mold a little, maybe go with something different. The other thing I didn't like is there are a few times where the detective is questioning an assistant to the author about the writing process, and honestly, it made me roll my eyes pretty hard. These are questions that in general, a day-to-day person would already have an idea of the answer to about authors. What did I like? Because there were a lot of wonderful, amazing things about this book, and beyond this gorgeous cover, that I would highly recommend. So I did like, in my mysteries, I like my mysteries to keep me guessing, and that's exactly what this did. It built the suspense really well, and it kept me guessing all the way through, which I loved. Silvis is able to get some beautiful language and imagery into this, more than I was expecting from a mystery thriller, so I was impressed with that. So if you like beautiful language, this is a good one to pick up. And the last thing that I loved about this one is that we have some flawed characters here, and you know me if you watched a lot of these reviews, I am big on flawed characters. None of us are perfect, and I like when my characters show that same thing. This book was filled with flawed characters, so who should read this one? If you are a mystery thriller fan, you're going to want to pick this one up, specifically if you like crime novels with detectives trying to solve cases. If you like your thrillers to be more psychological thrillers and have you trying to solve mysteries and keep you guessing, this is a great one for that. And lastly, if you're a reader who likes to be surprised by the books you pick up, I'm going to suggest 2 Days Gone by Randall Silvis. 4-star book for me, 14th book for the month of July. This has been an incredibly productive month for me. Shockingly so. Anyway, 15th book for the month of July was an audiobook. This one here, Archer Mayer's Open Season. It was first published in 1988, but this edition was re-released in 2013 by March Media. It is a mystery thriller, and it was about 320 pages. Your synopsis: a murder in a quiet town could force a 3-year-old case to be reopened and bring questions no one wants to ask. But let's talk about the things I didn't like first. This is a silly thing to have a problem with. Normally, I just mention covers when they're great. I actually do love this cover. It really is pretty. But it bothered me that the author's name is larger than the title of the book. So that's a silly thing to be bothered by, and I'm aware of that, but it did bother me. There's overuse of profanity that seems to be unnecessary. In general, I don't have a problem with profanities in my books. They don't bother me at all. I don't know if it's because I was listening to the audiobook, and maybe I wouldn't have noticed it if I was reading it in print. Maybe you'd start to skim through and ignore the F word. And it seemed overused and unnecessary to me. Some of the descriptions of characters or places were too long, overdone. You get a whole paragraph on what a place looks like when we really just want to get back into the story. We don't necessarily care. The language was nice, but the description was overdone. The last one I would say is that some of these characters were very cliche, which again normally doesn't bother me, and I mention it only as a side note if I'm stretching for things not to like. But in this case, cliche characters led to a predictable crime thriller, which is unfortunate. So what did I like? Because there were some things about this book that I liked. And in fact, for some of you, these are going to be things that make you want to go out and grab this book immediately. Like this first one. The police procedure in this book seems to be way more accurate and realistic than some other crime thrillers that I've read. So if you are someone who gets hung up a lot or gets irritated when police procedure is not done correctly, I'm going to suggest you find Open Season by Archer Mayer. Second thing I liked is that I mentioned some of the characters were a little cliche. Joe seemed to me to be a little refreshing in that break from all the rest of the cliche cast here. I actually liked Joe. He seemed like a delightfully complex character who I could really get to like, and I think this is a character who reappears in this series as the series goes on. So he might be a reason for me to pick up a second one. Lastly, this is a mystery novel. So we do have a detective crime thriller novel here, and the mystery does hold my attention. It did keep me guessing. There were parts I figured out, but it did keep me guessing for most of it. So the mystery here was well done. So who should read this one? If you're a crime novel fan and you don't mind a series. Now, if you read a lot of detective books like I tend to, you know that they're not really a series. It's okay to pick it up later on, not have to read the first one, and not have to read them in order. I get the feeling this will be the same way. Well, we're going to follow this detective on his different cases. We won't necessarily have to read them in order, but this is the first one. So this does introduce us to a new detective. Overall, for me, I went 3 stars for this one. It is a well-done detective novel, but that's going to fall to a pretty niche genre. You're going to have to really love detective novels for this one, I think. It's not going to be for someone who's brand new to that genre. 16th book for the month of July is this book, The Grownup by Gillian Flynn. This is a 2014 release from Wiedenfeld and Nicholson. It is an adult age category mystery thriller, and it was also a short story, clocking in at only 64 pages. I listened to the audiobook version of this pretty quickly in one evening. Your synopsis: this is a short story following a woman who makes a living telling people what they want to hear, and the client who may actually have a haunted house. What didn't I like? There's not much to not like about this one. I could see it being a problem that it's a short story. The length wasn't a problem for me. I actually loved that I could read it, listen to it in an evening. I thought that was great. The other thing is we're dealing with an unreliable narrator here. So I know that's a hot topic for some people. They like their narrators to be likable and lovable, and you can't stand it when they're not. So she is an unreliable narrator. right from the beginning. You're going to be questioning how you feel about her. So what did I like about this one? I like the dark tone. I'm a fan of books that have a dark undertone to them, especially books like this. If you're going to come at me with what's supposed to be a scary thriller, a dark tone is a great way to do it. That was really cool. I also enjoyed the fact that this was a variation on a ghost story that you think you've heard. It started off one way, it took some twists, and I loved the way it wrapped up. I thought that was really cool. Speaking of which, the ending was shocking, but I liked it. It was a good shocking. I liked to be shocked. I liked the way it ended. That was very neat. Last thing is, for me, this was a positive. That unreliable dark narrator for me is a hit every time. That's a trope that I can get behind. I love an unreliable dark narrator, and this book delivered. So, who should read this? If you're in the mood for a quick, dark, short story, I'm definitely going to recommend this one highly. I don't think you can go wrong with it. Just know what you're getting into. It is a quick, dark, short story. For me, this one was 5 stars because it was exactly what I was looking for. It perfectly delivered. So 5 stars to The Grownup by Gillian Flynn. So my last 17th and final book for the month of July is Essence by Mandi Lynn. This is a 2013 release by Stone Ridge Books. It is an indie book. It is 331 pages, and I would say young adult fantasy. Your synopsis. Emma feels a shift in the atmosphere, and suddenly she's an essence, watching the world go by, but unable to interact. What didn't I like about this one? I read I Am Mercy by Mandi Lynn before this one. So I should say I Am Mercy was released after this, and I read it first. So part of the problem, I think, for me was that I read these out of order the way they were intended. So I Am Mercy gave me almost spoilers for things that I think would have shocked me or surprised me about Essence. So I think for someone who's never read I Am Mercy, this would be packed with things that shock and surprise you. But for me, it didn't do that. So if you've never read anything by Mandi Lynn, I'd suggest reading this one before reading I Am Mercy. This book takes place over what I believe is a long period of time. The reason I have to say I believe is because one of the things I didn't like about this is that for me, the timeline wasn't very consistent. Now, I understand that Emma's essentially becoming an essence, like a spirit, kind of almost like a ghost. So her sense of time is going to be a little bit off. But for the reader, it made it a little confusing. Our timeline seemed fluid, and that was really tough for me to figure out. The last is I was hoping for there to be more exploring or learning about what an essence is or playing around with what an essence is. Now remember, for me, I got some of that in I Am Mercy, but I keep thinking of it as Emma. Emma, the character, didn't have any introduction to this, and Essence was Mandi's first book. So I was hoping for more playing around with that. Actually, that leads me right into what I did like. One of the things that I loved about this book is when Emma does play around with the essence once, there's a great scene with a deer that I just wish the whole book had been like that. That scene was marvelous. I loved that. Another thing I liked is that there are some wonderful relationships in this book that are really well written and very relatable. There are parent-child relationships that are really well written. There's friend relationships that are well written, and even like found family sibling relationships, which if you watch the channel, you know found family is like just the way to make my heart sing. And there was some found family stuff going on in this that I completely loved. So the relationships are very, very well written. Overall, the general idea for this book was really great, and I love that she explored this really in 2 books now. So the idea here is it's like a play on a ghost story or a play on what could happen after you die. So I liked that. I really thought that that was an interesting concept, and I liked that Mandi explored it. With that in mind, who should read this one? If you are interested in the idea of a ghost story that is not a horror novel, I'm going to suggest you check out Essence by Mandi Lynn. If you like when you connect with a character and you like beautiful language, specifically in young adult, you're going to enjoy that in Essence. It's there. Overall, I went 3 stars. This is a good novel. I don't think it's going to appeal to everyone. I do think you need to be in that niche audience, someone who would like the idea of playing with what could happen in the afterlife. But otherwise, I think you're going to love this one. So if you happen to be in that niche, I think you should check this one out. Okay, I think that's it for me, right? 17 books is enough. That is it for me. So those are all the books that I read in July. I would love if you stuck around with me this long and watched this whole thing like a champ. I think you should drop a comment down below. Let me know if you think it would be a good idea to split this into 2 videos next time. Is there a number that if I go over that, I should pause and do 2 videos? You thinking 10 books? What are we thinking? I don't always read this much. This was crazy. Either way, thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you are an author or a publisher, please make sure you fill out the submission form that's down under here to get your reviews on this channel. If you don't already subscribe, hit the subscribe button so you know when I'm back. Keep plotting the path to your dreams, and I will see you next time. Bye.